So you can skip to about, I think, 4.5 minutes in or 5 minutes in to see me show the build and pause the video as I go through everything here. I didn't feel like showing, like, playing music like you usually do here, because honestly, this guy, you'll see, he's just, it's not as good or as fun as my main tank, which is the melee dude. However, I can tell there's something here. There's definitely something here. Like, his focus, like, when I can start focusing my fire on something, I can tell I do arguably more damage than my melee dude when I'm focused on someone. At least before my melee dude stacks a ton of berserk, which of course he often does in these fights, especially solo. However, in co-op, that obviously wouldn't happen, though, as much for my melee dude. Another reason I wanted to try and find an alternative tank to him. But, yeah, this guy, he is, like, he's good in the sense that obviously, I choose this area of the map because this is, like, one of the harder fights of the world, I've noticed. Like, there's always a ton of badars with modifier enemies that spawn, and then a freaking tank here at the end. An elite tank, which tend to do boatloads of damage too. So, it's a great fight for testing builds, I feel like, both to see how fast you clear it compared to other builds, and how well you survive it too, because it's usually a good test of skill. Because I remember coming in here with a friend suddenly when I was doing the campaign. I thought I was in endgame. I didn't realize this is just some random mob spawn during the final area of the game. I'm like, wow, this fight before was harder than most boss fights for me. And you see here, like, I'm just not maintaining my shield, which is the armor, rather, which is the issue. Although, now that I think about it, oh man, I'm wondering if I would want to try using a shield instead of armor, actually, now that I think about it. Because the thing is, like, when I have my skill up and I don't have the vengeance meter filled, I take 0 damage from the front. Which means, obviously, I'm probably playing not how I should. I'm, like, going in the fray. Also, like, I'm trying, right now in this video, I'm deliberately aiming down my sights to try and get the bonus damage, but honestly, I'm learning that it just ain't worth it. I hate trying to do this. There's so much going on, and the shield honestly gets in the way of your visibility for me, where I'm like, dude, this is just annoying. Trying to shoot with the sights down, too. I'm like, screw this. I'm just going to, later on, whenever I do this, I'm just going to get back to just moving around fast, as I usually do, even with the shield out, and just use hip fire. But I wanted to try doing aim down sights, since the augment I use offers a buff to that too. But I mean, what does this build do though? I mean, obviously it's meant to be super tanky too, to be invincible as much as I can be, and to make sure its damage is not so ridiculously low that it doesn't take ages to kill things. Unfortunately, it's you'll see, like, this guy is a lot worse at clearing than my melee dude is. Now, for killing a boss, he might still be at the relative same speed, at least again, unless my melee dude stacks a ton of berserk suddenly. But again, they'll probably remove that exploit at some point in the future. Even if they do, I still see my melee dude doing way better than this guy. And yeah, right here also, I accidentally forgot to maintain my cooldown, so I lost my freaking skill when I usually have it out forever. Thankfully, it was the very end of the mission, though. But yeah, this guy, I will say, his damage at least has more room for improvement than my melee dude does, because he's missing 2 key passives. You'll see, I'm still using the same specialization as my melee dude because I didn't have anything else. But there's a passive that increases ordnance damage by 50% of your gun, and then there's another passive that increases your gun damage as you just keep firing guns. So that'll definitely be 2 that I'm going to slap on this guy at some point. I'm not done with this build. This build, I see a future for it still. It's hard, like, it's annoying me because I can tell, you'll see when I do my melee comparison, and you'll know when you see my previous Onslaughter versions to my super tank build, the guy is just way better at both tanking and damage and fun, because he's like Doom Guy. It's like, he beats this guy in all 3 areas: fun, tankiness, and and damage even. Now, what is this guy? What will this guy though beat the melee Onslaughter dude in? Well, hopefully, if I can ever make him so, I think the priority is more not even really damage. I need to find out some way if there is ways to hopefully make him tankier so he can actually rival my Onslaughter dude too. Because the problem is, yeah, he's really tanky, but without the Onslaughter healing, there's always hits in this game that just take out your armor immediately and annoyingly, no matter what. There's boss hits that just take it out. That's why both my builds use the Thrill health restoration, because I learned even on the most invincible tank, you still want to have health regen, because there's some attacks that just simply take out all the player's armor. I'm convinced they're BS attacks that just take out a player's armor no matter what your build is or your armor is. There's definitely some bosses that do that nonsense. And the problem is, this guy can't recover from that nearly as quickly as my Onslaughter guy can, because obviously Onslaught has a crap load of armor regen constantly, and it got buffed even. They didn't buff Scourge. They buffed Scourge's damage, but not as much as Onslaughter, I believe, and they didn't buff its tankiness side anymore. But how Scourge works is all damage from the front does nothing to you until your vengeance meter is filled, and then it actually does do damage to you. Now you get a 60% damage reduction, but as I've explained, damage reduction in this game, it's not as good as it says it is, and it doesn't make nearly as much of a difference as you think. So if you really want to be a tank with Scourge, you're forced to deplete your vengeance meter at some point, which also means you're forced to get out of your shield. I mean, not that often, but still, I'm forced to drop the defense, basically, just to make sure I can maintain the defense. So that can also be annoying, trying to cycle that, too. But yeah, this guy, let me just say, if you saw the build, what I see in the future is this guy is meant to be a true tank, though. Because he's the only he's the only augment in the game that actually taunts enemies. He actually draws aggro, like a true tank should. You've seen my videos. I'm always obsessed with trying to make a true tank. I don't care about bruiser or DPS builds that can survive. Just more hybrid DPS builds. I do want to add damage to my builds to the extent that it doesn't feel like I take ages to kill things. Of course, I still want to try to do that when I can. And I still need to do that some for the boss killing, because of course even my melee dude, he still takes way too long to kill bosses, I feel like sometimes. But still, my priority is always survivability over DPS, and then DPS comes secondary to what I try to make on all my builds. It's survivability first, and also, if I can, try to make the classic tank, meaning he actually draws aggro if there is any way to draw aggro in a game. That's how I like to play. That's how I've always played, and I like to make that in every game that has build crafting in it. This is the only tank that actually draws aggro. His taunt draws aggro in a really wide radius. And not only that, if you see all the skill nodes in the bonuses, it taunts all the enemies around you, so all the enemies focus on you instead of your teammates, and it freezes them constantly, and I realized I could build it around status effect application, so to just constantly freeze them, which in turn also activates the weakness debuff and the damage over time from Tail of Comet debuff on everybody. And like I said, I'm still missing an ordnance damage buff. I'm confident when it's already at the point where I slowly kill off the fodder enemies all around the field constantly while taunting everybody else. I have a feeling there's some way I can increase the damage on that build more, on the Scourge build more, so that the constant taunt ability augment winds up wiping the freaking fodder enemies. He becomes almost like a wipe build for fodder enemies, and then also still a tank who then starts taking all the damage from the remaining elite enemies. So they're also not a threat to players. Also, he heals players. He does everything. He taunts the whole field. He slowly whittles down the whole field. He freezes the whole field. He debuffs the whole field because of the weakness being on all of them. And he heals all surrounding teammates. That's what I'm saying. That's why I want that build to be so much better. I want it to be better. But as you'll see here, it ain't nearly as good as this. I mean, it's funny when you think about it, because a lot of the YouTube influencers and all the popular players out there, they'll of course say Onslaughter is trash, Red Tree Amon is C tier or less for leveling up and the end game. I couldn't believe it when I saw like some of like Moxie's videos saying that it's a bad build to even level up with. I'm like, oh, are you kidding me? I did do that. I mean, yeah. But again, it's because they're all obsessed with one-shotting bosses. Because, yeah, it took me ages to kill a boss, leveling him up. But it was never a challenge. And that's how I rate, like, well, are you dying at all? Does it feel like a challenge to get through fights? And the answer on Red Tier Amon was absolutely not, for the most part. Like, you can go through the whole game on hard difficulty and you know, your first playthrough on the campaign, as I did, and virtually nothing was a challenge to me. The first few levels, when you don't have anything, are the worst, because you need to actually start getting your skills up and stuff. But it's actually a build that gets very strong very quickly for the tankiness part of it. That's what it does. So, yeah, that was... Like Red Tier Amon, Melee Amon, actually, don't let any players tell you otherwise. If your goal is to just make the game easy, and easy meaning feel you're just casually playing and decimating things, no matter how long sometimes a boss fight might take, well then yeah, it's incredibly easy. You don't got to do anything. Just punch them till they're dead. So, yeah, I disagree with those videos at least. I can understand it in the end game, because in the end game, then bosses are obviously more important, and just people are just farming them, and then you just want to farm super quickly, so you just want to one-shot the boss every single time. And yeah, obviously, no, you can't do that on it. Well, actually, you can do it on a Melee Amon, but not the build I came up with. Well, that's not true either, because I feel like there's so many... The problem is there's so many exploits to damage in Borderlands 4 currently that you can easily just use, like, I think, the crit knife and maybe one gun on a pure tank build and still one-shot bosses. So, as I said before, if anything, it actually makes tank builds superior right now, because you could build them to still one-shot bosses and also make them be invincible, like on Amon, without having to do anything else. So I don't know. I honestly would probably argue that, like, you could even make a case that Red Tier pure invincible tank Amon is maybe the best build in the game if you give him those exploit weapons so that he can still one-shot a boss, because then everywhere else it's just super easy mode for him. So, like, mobbing's easy. He never dies from anything at all. As I said before, I can stand in the middle of a third phase boss fight right in front of the boss and just twiddle my thumbs, just making sure to hit my rep kit every once in a while so my action skill duration stays on, and they're not ever doing anything to me. And on that note, again, this is why the Melee build you'll see, it's just better than the blue one. And that's what I was saying. Like, a lot of these players will say Scourge Blue Tree Amon is a much better option than Red Tree Onslaughter. And at least when it comes to trying to design a invincible tank, I can tell you now, from experience using similar gear on all of them, but trying to change the skill tree and using those skills, the blue skills versus the red, it's like, nope. You'll see, it is vastly inferior. It's vastly inferior in every way when it comes to damage, to tanking, and to fun even. I know that's more subjective, but it's like, well, obviously, running around with rocket punch and everything, increasing your movement speed, while you just shoot your guns in between rocket punching everything and zooming around the field, you feel like you're Doom Guy. Whereas on the Scourge build I made, obviously you're kind of stationary. It's kind of the exact opposite of that kind of play style. Again, I think in the future I'm not going to bother using aim down sight mode much on it, because it's just so annoying, especially when you are the focus of attention, to try and do that. So I'll probably return to using hipfire. Again, people might say, I guess you're supposed to play them where you deliberately try to make sure all the enemies are constantly in front of you. So it's kind of a positional way to fight rather than running around like you're in Melee, which I want to do. The problem with that is that just proves the melee build is superior again, because there's so much crap going on. There's so much chaos happening in these fights. Enemies are almost always on multiple angles from you, multiple different threats with multiple different elements hitting you, multiple different kinds of attacks. It's stupid to try and play like that, where you're trying to do it positionally, trying to keep them all in front of you and hope your shield, hope some enemy that can like one-shot your armor doesn't flank you. It still makes for an inferior tank when you can just go in there on a melee Onslaughter and you're already invincible without having to do anything. So, yeah, unfortunately, I say this truly, unfortunately, for my testing, Scourge tank build is definitely not as good as melee tank build. But again, for support, for team support and what a tank does, that's where it's at though, because of the taunt ability and getting your infinite skill with the taunt augment is what allows you again to whittle the field down, freeze the whole field, debuff the whole field for all the players, because then every enemy is going to have weakness on them. And doing damage over time to everybody, and then taunting, of course, the whole field. So the whole field is just focused on you, as it should be if you're the tank. I really wish the melee build could do that, because it makes no sense to me that the melee build is the superior durability tank, but yet he can't draw aggro. Like, it never makes any sense. This is true in a lot of modern games. They'll throw in like one old school like taunt or aggro ability for tanks, and it'll be on a freaking DPS version. That is just the stupidest thing ever. And it's like the old RPG idea of like, well, obviously if a tank's going to draw aggro, he needs to be as tanky as possible, and it's the same in this game where that's not the case. Because the shield build is not as tanky as the Onslaught melee build. And that's really, I'll finally shut up now. That's what you'll see here. And yeah, I'll show the melee build. You've already seen it in my last video. It's the same build. But I'll go through it again after I wipe out these enemies. It took me, I think, 4.5 minutes to do it on my Scourge build, my Scourge version of the tank build. It took me 4.5 minutes, and I got close to dying, too. You'll see in this one, I think I actually do maybe get halfway down my armor, but it was... If I ever do, it's because of the damage I do to myself, not from the enemies. And even when that happens, it's still not a threat because of, again, the regen, because I have so much more regen than the Scourge dude has. So when he goes to half armor, it actually is much more threatening to him, versus this guy where going to half armor is just common and it just always shoots back up anyway, no matter what's going on. So you'll see. Tankiness, way better. And I believe he does this same area in under 2 minutes. And by the way, I've done this bit, that is with Berserk and Groundbreaker stacking, but I've actually done it without both of those, and he still does it faster. I think without Groundbreaker or Berserk on the same kind of melee build, he still clears this area, I think in like 3.5 minutes, which is obviously still substantially faster than even the Scourge dude. And of course, he's still invincible, he's still tankier, so... Unfortunately, it's just a way better tank for now. But again, I will go back. I just wanted to showcase this Scourge build I've come up with, because I do, like I said, it's not terrible, and I see some potential. Once I get the specialization passes unlocked for it, and potentially some better weapon types maybe and gear to equip for that kind of playstyle, once I do that, I'm going to revisit it again. Because I know its damage, at least, can go up substantially, especially its AoE damage. However, unfortunately still, I don't think I can really increase its tankiness in any way much more now, which is a problem when he seems to still struggle on certain areas to stay alive.